Good afternoon, Houston. My name is Madison Young, and this is News History 1. Today we're going to throw it back to the 13th century to discuss a guy named Marco Polo. Who was he, what did he do, and why is he important? Now to Stone to talk about who he was.
Thank you, Madison. Marco Polo was born in 1254 AD to wealthy Venetian jewel merchants. For most of his childhood he was parentless, and his mother died at a very young age. His uncle and father were both in Asia as traveling merchants, and he did not meet his brother, uncle, or father until his late teens. At the age of 17, he left with them to go travel across Asia as traveling merchants. Back to you, Madison.
Okay, thank you, Stone, for the background information about Marco Polo. Now to Brianna to talk a little bit about his travels to China.
Alright, thank you, Madison. Okay, Madison, so to tell you more about the Silk Road, it's just a trading route from East Asia to China. Marco Polo traveled the world, but today we're going to focus on the Silk Road. During medieval times, the Silk Road was only known to go so far, but because of Marco Polo and his family, they were able to be the first ones to make a detailed experience about their travels in China. When Marco Polo first arrived in China, it was whenever the Mongol Empire was trying to take over the Song dynasty completely. The Mongol Emperor would not let Marco Polo leave for 17 years. While he was there, he decided to take opportunity and travel all around China to find many different things. Rhubarb has medicinal properties that help people at that time due to its laxative type properties. Another aspect that Marco Polo discovered that Europe hasn't seen at all was that they distilled wine and alcoholic beverages so that way you could get, well, drunk way faster. Distillation was an important aspect of hospitality since it brought a new way of creating alcoholic beverages that can evolve over time. Alright, Madison, now back to you at the studio.
Okay, thank you, Brianna, for talking about his travels to China. Now let's send it over to Nancy to talk about his times after China.
Thank you, Madison. I'm here today to talk more about Marco Polo and his time after his 17 years in China. In 1292, Kublai Khan decided that a Mongolian princess was to be sent to Persia in order to be the consort of the Khan of Iran. The Khan of Iran was known as Arghun Khan. At this point, the Polo family was eager to return to Venice due to the fact that Kublai Khan was nearing the age of 80. At this point, with his death, would come great change in the Mongolian Empire. With his death would also come change in leadership, and the Marco Polo family was worried that with this change in leadership, the new Khan would not look upon them as favorably as the last Khan did. With this, the Polos and 600 courtiers and sailors, accompanied with the princess, got on 14 different ships to head out to the port. The group had to stop at Sumatra, an island off Indonesia, for 5 months in order to wait out the monsoon season. However, after the monsoon season, they continued on to Hormuz, an island off of Persia. After docking here, the party traveled to Khorasan to deliver the princess, only to find out that Arghun had died and instead gave the princess to his son. After delivering the princess, the Polo family returned to Christian countries, only to face a major culture shock. All the wealth they had accumulated while they were overseas had been taken from them, and only in 1295 were they finally able to return to their home in Venice. And now, back to Madison of the studio.
Okay, thank you, Nancy, for talking about his days after China. Now let's send it over to Hiram to talk about the book, The Travels of Marco Polo.
Okay, thank you, Madison. So, let's see, Marco Polo's book, or better yet known as The Travels of Marco Polo. You see, the backstory of this book is so amazing, so elusive, that it's crazy if you really think about it. You see, Marco Polo was a prisoner at that time the book was written, and in his prison cell there was a writer. Not a famous one, but he was an adequate writer. And so, of course, when you're in a prison cell with somebody else, pretty much you're gonna talk, of course. And so these guys talk with each other. And Marco Polo starts talking about his life. And so the writer is like, hey, you know what would be a great idea if I wrote a book about your life? And Marco Polo was like, yeah, let's get on board with it and let's do it. And so Marco Polo starts telling his life story, and the writer starts to write it down. And after the book was done, it became an overnight sensation. People loved the book. They thought it was very interesting. But here was the conflict. You see, not many people believed that Marco Polo really did all those things, those magnificent and crazy, out of the ordinary adventures that this young man did. And come to think of it, me myself, if I was in their shoes, I probably wouldn't believe it in myself. Because if you really think about it, there are some things that just don't seem to be right. But it actually turned out to be factual. And this book was so interesting, so inspirational, that they actually made a show about it. I mean, you know, business-wise, it's a great standpoint, but historically wise, they did a pretty good job. And let's be honest, a lot of us are not going to read the book. I wouldn't read the book, if I'm being honest, but if I really want to know about this man and what he did, what crazy, elusive things that he went through, I can actually watch it in one of these. And so, that's what I'm going to leave y'all with today. The Marco Polo Netflix series. Back to you, Madison.
Thank you, Hiram. Now let's send it over to Jazz to do a little Q&A with the UH students.
So here we are at the Conrad N. Hilton College, and we're going to ask some of our fellow HRM students what they know about Marco Polo. And here we have a student right here. So, do you know who Marco Polo is? What comes to mind when you hear that name?
The game, Marco Polo.
Absolutely. So I just want to give you a little quick view. Marco Polo was a merchant, and he definitely helped our hospitality industry. So, you know, definitely just something to keep in mind. Thank you. Okay, we have some more students here, so I just want to ask them, do you guys know what the Silk Road is?
Yeah, so it's a trade route. Apologies, it's a trade route in Asia.
Okay, thank you. Did you know what it was?
Actually not really.
All right, thank you guys so much for your time.
No problem.
Okay, do you know who Marco Polo is?
No, really. I just played the game.
That's what everybody says. Do you want to know who he is a little bit?
Yeah, sure, I'm curious.
Sure. It was a merchant from Italy, and he had a big cultural impact on the hospitality industry. You should definitely get into more knowing who he is.
That's really good. So basically, he came over here and he did like a lot.
Basically, he was from Europe, and then he traveled to Asia, and there he discovered the compass. He was also the one who brought distilled alcohol to Europe. Without him, we would probably not even have cocktails today. Okay, here I am with Miss Chelsea, one of our homecoming court contenders for this year. And I just want to ask her, do you know who Marco Polo is?
Not that much. I know the game. That's all I really know about it.
Okay, absolutely. Just one more question. Do you know about the Silk Road?
The Silk Road. I've heard of it, but don't know, like I can't tell you history on it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
So now we are on campus, and I just want to ask, do you know who Marco Polo is? Do you have any idea? What comes to mind when you hear the name Marco Polo?
Like the game in the bowl.
In the bowl?
In the pool.
In the pool.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Do you know who Marco Polo is?
I do actually.
Great. Can you tell us just a little bit about what you know?
He came over from like Spain, or it was one of Spain or Italy, or one of them. It was Italy, and he came over to America, and he was the one who actually first found it. And then Columbus took all the credit for it in Spain.
So
for him.
actually, that was really close. He went to Asia, and then Columbus tried to follow him and went the wrong way.
Oh shoot!
Yep. So thank you, ma'am. I just want to ask y'all, do y'all know who Marco Polo is? Yeah, can you just give me an idea of what you think that is or who that is?
I just know it's a good game.
Yeah.
parking garage, and I just want to ask these ladies, do they know who Marco Polo is?
Marco Polo?
Mm-hmm.
The name sounds familiar.
Do you have any idea what comes to mind when you hear the name Marco Polo?
The game.
The game? He seems like he got it. Yes, ma'am. Close. A merchant. He traveled to Asia. All right, and then he also traveled the Silk Road.
Yeah, thank you, Jazz, for that Q&A with the students. It's crazy to think students our age actually don't know who Marco Polo is and or know what he's known for. He played such a huge role in the hospitality industry. It's crazy to think, like, if he never traveled, if he never adventured, if he never traded, we wouldn't have what we have today. As a matter of fact, Europe did not have any wine before Marco Polo. I mean, they may have had some, people may have known what it was, but it wasn't like it is nowadays. China was actually the main source of wine during Marco Polo's times. So without Marco Polo's travels, there would be no wine in Europe, there would be no vineyards, there would be no Italian wine. Another huge thing Marco Polo made an impact in today's society is traveling. We all love to travel. We see it all over Visco, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat. It's everywhere. We see it, we've done it, we've experienced it. Without him, we probably would be too afraid. Who knows? The world may be flat without Marco Polo's travels. It also kind of inspired Christopher Columbus. For sure, without Christopher Columbus, the world would be flat. He kind of started that whole thing, traveling all the way from Europe to China. No one even thought to do that, and Marco Polo did it. He also traded. Were huge trades. We've heard of NAFTA, North America Free Trade Agreement. That probably would not be a thing without Marco Polo and his trading that he did with China and Europe. It's just crazy to think that students don't know who he is, and my group, our group, we were here to tell you guys about him, and I'm glad that we got to, because without him, there probably would not be world travel today. Let's go ahead and head into our group meeting to kind of wrap up this entire video. Come on in.
So as you heard in the video, Marco Polo was a young explorer with not much from his childhood, but he made a lot out of it.
Marco Polo spent 17 years in China and discovered many things.
During that time, he was a prisoner in war, and probably one of the greatest books of all time, The Travels of Marco Polo, was made.
And just like the rest of the students here, I was an uneducated person on Marco Polo, but luckily I was able to learn and give my education to the rest of my fellow classmates.
Yeah, so kind of like you've heard here, Marco Polo was a traveler. He was able to travel from Europe to Asia, where we learned so many different things, and probably without him, the hospitality industry would not be the same.